Hello, welcome to my YouTube demo. This painting is of a scene from Ogunquit Beach in Maine. When low tide comes there, a sandbar type beach island almost appears out of the water, and people go out there, and there's a small channel that runs through the two beaches. It's a great place for children to play, people to kind of get maybe a little bit away from the crowd, at least until the crowd shuffles down. Water's a bit warmer, maybe it gets 2 feet deep or so in between the land and the island part. So this image is from that island looking back towards Ogunquit. I'm sketching with alizarin yellow. It's toned back a little bit, maybe it's a touch of burnt sienna, something to just reel it in a little bit. I'll go over my palette quick. You can see the corner of it there. Top left is titanium white, cadmium yellow light, cadmium orange. The red always fluctuates. At this time, I believe it was cadmium red medium. Sometimes it's cad red light, sometimes it's naphthol red. Just depends on what I have and what my mood is. The next red to the right is quinacridone red. That's the workhorse. To the right of that is alizarin yellow, which I mentioned a minute ago. That's a great yellow. It's like an Indian yellow, but it's less orange and maybe more neutral in its mass tone, but seems to glow when it's spread thin, especially over a white canvas. To the right of that is burnt sienna, which I barely use, but I do knock down colors with it once in a while. Usually it's just dried hard on my palette, and that is burnt sienna's sentence on my palette, I guess. Going south from the titanium white is ultramarine blue, phthalo blue. Sometimes I'll use Gamblin radiant blue or radiant teal if I have it. I go through it pretty quick because it's just really convenient, and when you need that nice, clean, really light value blue, it's there. Especially at the end of a painting when you've turned your palette into a disaster zone. Below that, I'll put phthalo emerald from Gamblin. That's my preferred phthalo green. It's a yellow shade of what we all normally associate as phthalo green. To me, it mixes better. When you add white to it, it is definitely electric. If you want to paint a green light in a city scene, that's your color. And once in a while below that, I might put radiant green if I come across that, but that's also made with radiant green and white basically. So that's the palette. Okay, so moving into the painting, I've massed in maybe a couple hundred people, especially in the background there. I really went simple and just went for the shape that people were taking up, their distant umbrellas. And I have very light markings for the distant lodging and parking lot that is on the right, which is, it's a nice place to work on your narrow value range. When you have distant details that you can't suck all your attention there. So it's a good place to play around with color changes within a value that all stay subtle. It's a fun place to mix. It's a good place to use some of those colors on your palette that you're like, oh, I mixed a bunch of that and I don't really have a use for it, but you can turn it into a bigger pile of some neutrals that, that's where I tend to put them. I'm trying to establish the people in the foreground first. Some of them will go through radical changes between now and the end photo, which you'll see at the end of the video. But it's all a process. So I try and establish them. I get their colors, their values kind of set, and that gives me something to bounce off of for the sand, which, as simple as painting sand sounds, when you're there, it's quite elusive. And you can tell there's a corner of my computer screen just on the right there, and that's the video. Sorry, that's the place where I'm painting from photo reference while I listen to some music on that little open screen. And I also have some plein air sketches of where I'm getting some of the colors for these people. Those are off further to the right. I'm still painting in half of my living room, which is fine. We're working on the studio. Hopefully that'll be done this year, or at least I'll be able to inhabit it. I'll be able to move most of my gear and supplies out here. I have a wood stove just waiting. It's going to be great. Okay, so if you notice now, the whole painting is, I wouldn't say it's a Z-shaped composition, but it's definitely bringing you left to right, and then the foreground characters are definitely interrupting that flow and making you come back to them. And then you will escape and you'll come back out to look at some of the other happenings, if you will, in the painting. And I've tried covering up the seagull in the foreground, and the composition just doesn't work. It's not balanced. So try and do that later on in the video when you see the full painting. Maybe pause it and cover the seagull and let me know what you think. But to me, that seagull makes the entire painting. So now, as I go over the masses and get the values a little bit more established, I'm in the background. If you notice, it's a very neutral color, just a warm and a cool, basically. A little bit of the distant trees. It's very tempting especially when you're looking at a photo and you have all the time in the world to go, oh no, that's an intense green because I'm looking directly at it and it's intense green. You have to remember that the idea of a painting is not, the idea of my paintings is not to have everything in focus, to not have everything have that big value shift that happens when you look at something directly. I mean, we all know that if we look at the top of a tree to the sky, it looks like we're looking at almost black and white, like we're looking at the brightest and the darkest. But then if we look at that top of the tree compared to the bottom of the tree, somehow it got darker. And then if we held up a brush with a black handle from 80 feet away, that handle is darker than the bottom of that tree. So that's something to keep in mind when you're painting. The shadows of these foreground people, because it's a sunny day, they will get a bit darker, but they're also going to have more intensity due to their proximity to us, not just value change. We're going to try and keep everything in balance, relate all the colors, this is to this as that is to that, keeping that ideal should keep you out of trouble. Or it can get you into a lot of trouble, actually, because as soon as you stop relating, your painting can fall apart. You're seeing this video in about 10 minutes. I worked on it for hours. I worked on it for maybe an hour after this video ended. You'll see the finished painting at the end, but I let it sit for a few days, and then I even touched it up a little bit more. Sometimes you have to let these things kind of settle in, get fresh eyes every day. Sometimes I'll walk around the house and I'll almost snap my head around to look at the painting like I'm going to catch it doing something that it wasn't doing when I was first looking at it. And that's, sometimes I wonder if the Rembrandt fairy has visited it overnight and, maybe fix something that I was questioning. It's a good time. But it's a lot of work and a lot goes into it. It might look like a simple painting, but it's I put a lot of thought into laying this out, having this child kind of toddling towards a seagull right past the reflections in the water there. The seagull arrives eventually. A little discarded water bottle there. I'll see a lot of paintings, painting demos where people will start with it almost looks like they're painting with molasses, like they're starting their painting with the darkest dark you can get. It's almost like ink. And I think that starting somewhere in the mid-range, it lets you establish things and have maybe warm midtones, or whatever midtones are, whatever the color is you use for the midtones in your drawing, poke through, the entire painting, rather than little specks of ink, almost an ink black or a grape jelly. That is, I'm not going to say it's a pet peeve of mine, but it's definitely something that I think is counterproductive to a painting that has air in it. If you're trying to get air in a painting, you definitely want to avoid white and black. You want to get away from that. Now, some of those masses in the back there of people, you'll see that I'm leaving this warmish mass shape, and then I'm coming in and I'm making cool variations on a part of it. Maybe that's where some people are leaning, and there's some sun hitting them. There's some blue sky hitting their back or something. It would be easy with a photograph to just go in and be, there it is. There's that cool I was talking about. It would be easy enough to look at the photo and just keep getting down to photo detail. That's the easy way to paint, to just keep copying things, almost like a slave to the photo. It's definitely the easier way to go. Painting with the gesture of things and kind of wrangling that bear, if you will, to me is the hard way to paint. I think it's the more beautiful way to paint. I'd rather see a mass of warm and cool with some details, just, I don't know, hints of details to let me know what that is, because I don't want my eye hanging up there as part of the composition. I want the composition to be strong on where I want you to look. I want the composition to be fast where I want you to glaze over. You might want to come back there and look again, which is great. That's the idea of a composition. I mean, that back area you could look at 100 times and you're going to find different shapes every time. So thank you for checking out my video. If you'd like to see more of my work, check out danielcorey.com. And if you'd like to support the channel, check out my Patreon. There's a link in the description, and there's a link on my website. Thanks. Be good to each other.